This is the story of a river and the people who have worked to save it. Its name, the Good River in the language of the Seneca. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "The Ohio is the most beautiful river on earth, its currents gentle, its water clear." But as the years passed and the population grew, as cities and towns and villages sprang up along its banks, and the wheels of industry began turning throughout the valley, the Good River became a little less beautiful, a little less clear, until, by the beginning of the 20th century,
Cincinnati was dumping 100 million gallons of untreated sewage into the Ohio River every day. All the other cities up and down the river were dumping their sewage into the river. I'll tell you how bad it was.
The river, for all intents and purposes, was an open sewer. And that was just a huge challenge. And what a waste of a wonderful resource. It was recognized early on that no one city, no one state, no one community could do this. It took an organization like ORSANCO. ORSANCO was really created through the better part of 2 decades of very intense negotiations between the governors. And at the time, we weren't sure how many states would come aboard or even if there would be an ORSANCO.
Yes, something had to be done. And on June 30th, 1948, 8 states began a regional crusade for clean water in the valley by creating the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission.
ORSANCO was one of the first collaborations between states to establish common environmental standards within a shared watershed.
But when you really look even before those negotiations started, it was the impact of business that really helped to provide that boost to get ORSANCO started. Hudson Berry, our first commissioner from Ohio, was a member of the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce. I know the Covington Chamber of Commerce was also involved. And business recognized what a lost opportunity we have with this wonderful resource and its really deplorable conditions. When you look at our compact, it talks about floating malodorous substances. Nothing says it better than that to visualize really how poor the water quality was back in the early 1900s.
This time the pollution is municipal sewage, being discharged without benefit of any purifying treatment. And this is what is being done about it. A new sewage treatment plant is being built. This is a part of about $1.5 billion worth of facilities that have been constructed in the Ohio Valley.
ORSANCO's been at the forefront of developing standards that have helped that happen in the various communities along the river. The science that ORSANCO provides into actual factual data collection for river management decisions, for standards development, have been huge.
Little by little, the river got better. In 1948, less than 1% of the municipal population along the main stem of the Ohio River was served by sewage treatment works. Over the next 15 years, that number had improved to 97% for the main stem and 85% for the entire basin.
That was a lot of our early years, and really collaboration and working together so that one sample that we take on the river is effective for all the border states. Also, we looked at protecting the uses downriver, making sure that no discharge within a state is injurious of a downstream state. You know, very important concepts that help pave the way for ORSANCO.
Hello, ORSANCO. This is river surveillance, 7 minutes out of Portsmouth. Barge below me, leaking oil steadily. Water polluted aft as far as I can see.
In the early 60s, ORSANCO created a series of public service announcements, its Clean Streams Crusade.
This is a waste disposer, large economy size. Dumping your untreated wastes into a stream looks cheap until you figure the real cost. Anyone for swimming?
All with the goal of raising awareness and encouraging change.
Things are happening on the Ohio and along its tributaries too. Here's another.
But compliance remained largely voluntary. What was the regulatory environment like pre-1972?
Pre-1972, I think the best example that anybody could look at is a video that ORSANCO did, Crisis on the Kanawha.
You know, when you get down below Charleston, the canal was really a mess. It actually stinks.
I don't see why they can't clean it up. After all, they have enough brains to figure out how to make those new detergents and those fancy plastics. Why can't they figure out a way to clean up their water instead of dumping all that stuff back into the canal? It's a disgrace.
Water pollution was absolutely prevalent. There really weren't any water quality standards. There was no permitting environment to be found.
But as the decade progressed, a budding environmental movement gained strength and momentum, culminating with the establishment of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 1970 and the Clean Water Act of 1972. Roughly 5 million people depend on the Ohio River for their drinking water source.
So when you bring that public health perspective that is so important for the Ohio, I think that gets people's attention. And I think it also gets people attention when you do have an aspirational goal, when you start to reimagine what this river could be for a community, for a region, for a cultural center of the United States. It reminds us how really special this river system is and how important it is to protect it.
Improvements aside, stories from the pre-ORSANCO days still haunt the Ohio, and it's a perception the organization is working to change.
If you were to ask them, most people would think it's a dirty river, and it's not a good resource. They don't understand the improvements and the leaps that have been made with water quality in the past 75 years. And that's not to say everything is perfect about it. There's still work to do. But I think it really is a good resource. I think there are people, particularly in the western United States, that would probably give their left and right leg to have a water resource like the Ohio River.
Bringing 8 states to the table and coming up with common standards and common actions and cost-saving actions. I think that's the greatest accomplishment. And ORSANCO has been the melting pot that has caused the river to overcome a lot of those little fiefdoms and get to great progress. So I think that's been one of its greatest things. And of course the science. Everyone looks to ORSANCO for science.
The science that they're doing, the PFAS sampling up and down the river, trying to identify sources, trying to identify other emerging pollutants, trying to identify for the legacy pollutants how much reduction we're realizing through just time. Some of it's through cleanup, the discontinued use of those chemicals, but also time heals, to a great extent. So we're doing new fish tissue sampling this year coming up to try to update the over a decade old legacy pollutant fish tissue numbers to see if the trends are truly there. The most recent studies we've seen for PCBs has indicated that there's a pretty significant negative trend.
And that may be the takeaway. Although there are still challenges ahead, the Ohio has made a significant recovery, reason enough to be optimistic for the future.
And the reason really comes down to how many people I see, communities, nonprofits, agencies, rolling their sleeves up and thinking through how they can work better together to go further, faster in improving the Ohio River. So I think we're at a real tipping point, and it's tipping in the right direction. I like that. It's exciting. So yes, I'm very optimistic about the future of the river. I see communities turning towards the river, where in the past they turned their backs to it. Communities are looking to make use of their recreational assets to draw tourism, investment, economic development. So I couldn't be more optimistic about the future, actually.
And the folks who've worked hardest to bring the good river back?
Well, it's pretty remarkable to be celebrating 75 years of anything holding itself together, right? It's a unique compact that has stood the test of time, and that in itself gives me optimism that states are still coming to the table, still discussing really hard issues when it comes to the river's needs and the communities it serves. So I'm hopeful that this body is still together and working, and we're, I think, at this inflection point, at a transition point of what ORSANCO is doing and building partnerships with community, with watershed groups, with the Ohio River Basins Alliance. We're coming out with a visionary restoration plan for the river that we hope leads to monumental and transformative investments for not only restoring but protecting the river for future generations to come. So when I see those pieces coming together and people putting the time and passion into that sort of vision, it feels like a new iteration, a new day for the future of ORSANCO.
The Ohio River stood a sorry monument to the excesses of civilization. Though it had made many rich, the river was the poorer for it. We nearly lost a treasure, but today things look better. The waters of the valley belong to generations other than our own. The river is forever.